Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode here of On the Blood Trail. Last time we did a group session here with the video recording and the three of us. It was a blast, and we decided we wanted to try and do another one here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of like trophy hunting and just the acceptance and how it's perceived within the hunting community. And we're also going to touch on just setting standards for yourself for what size of trophy you're going after, and how it looks to everybody else when you decide you want to kind of drop your standards, whether it's the last day of the hunt or just you decide that you're gonna just change your mind. So we got my brother Ryan here.
Good to be back, guys.
We just got finished with an awesome bear hunt. Ryan took his biggest bear with a bow. You guys can see that one on our YouTube channel. I got my first bear with a muzzleloader. Spencer made it out with us for an earlier season hunt. I haven't gotten around to editing that one yet, but our good friend Zach shot his first bear. It was another awesome time. Spencer, you can also see, shot that real nice bear of his a year ago. That one's on the YouTube channel as well. And just gonna start here with Spencer today. So when you go out into the bush and you decide, say we're deer hunting, it's the start of season, like what do you decide for setting expectations or standards for deer?
It really depends on the year for me. In some years I might be super passionate about meat hunting, others I am crazy about trophy hunting. In the area we're at, I usually set about 140 inch deer as the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be hard to break that for a lot of deer. Like this deer here beside me, I believe this one was 141 inches. It's a pretty nice buck, I think.
Yeah, it looks like a good buck.
Looked like he was in his prime. Even for size comparison with scoring deer, this shed here, a little bit nicer. When I scored it, I figured with the other side it would have been about 170 inch deer. If you see these on the hoof side by side there,
yeah, it's hard to tell.
like obviously you're shooting the drop tine, but if that was just a 5x5, you might go for the 4x4.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, character can be a big thing too.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I could agree with that.
Like I'd rather shoot a gnarly heavy buck than a beautiful 5-pointer.
Yeah, some guys are going for length, some guys go for mass, some are there for the gnarly junk. I think our dad's always told us that if it's got one of the three, then he's going to take it, and if it's got two of the three, that's a big bonus.
Yeah.
And so that goes a lot into deciding what you're going to shoot. Another big one is a lot of people set different standards for whether or not they're hunting with a bow or they're hunting with a gun, and because it's a little bit more achievable to get a bigger buck with the gun. Realistically speaking, your odds are a little bit better. You can shoot a lot further. Your chances of getting something with a rifle, just because it's that much more lethal of a weapon if used correctly, right? Mm-hmm. So Ryan, like, how do you approach bow hunting versus gun hunting for something like a deer?
Well, for me, generally, when I go into a bow hunting situation, I'm looking for a Pope young deer. And so that's kind of the standard that I set, whether that deer be 3.5, 4.5, depending on his gene pool, he may be bigger or smaller, or 4-point or 5-point score. To me, doesn't necessarily mean as much as the hunt is going to mean. At the end of the day, really, when I get into my stand, maybe I have my younger cousin with me, I'm trying to teach him, or maybe, Spencer is my best friend or my brother. If I have a nice 120-inch, 130-inch 4-point come in, it's a nice 20-yard shot. I know I can make a clean, ethical shot. Maybe I'm rushed for time. Maybe I got to go to work the next day, or I may not get out in the bush. I will take that deer. Now, if I know I have an entire month to hunt September, and I got a coveted tag, maybe I'm going on a guided hunt, or in a situation where you have the time and you can bring the patience, then I'd say all for it, and maybe trying to harvest the bigger deer.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, I think it's also about setting realistic standards for your trophy size. Like, I go out every year, I figure, you know what? Shot a lot of deer in that 120, 130, tickle 140 range. It'd be nice to shoot something that's in that 150 to 160 class, just because sometimes it's nice to, not even just to show it off to other people, because that's not what it's about. It's more so just trying to elevate the bar for yourself and trying to give yourself more of a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. But then that brings me to this. So Spencer, say you're sitting in your tree stand with your bow and you've decided that you want to shoot a 140 to 150 inch buck, and a 130 walks in at 20 yards.
I'd be in that scenario, and I'd look at the maturity of the buck.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's what makes them happy, is it's that you're shooting an upper age class deer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not going to be able to shoot those big bucks if you're shooting every nice 3-year-old that comes by.
Yeah.
Because you got to let them grow.
I agree.
Not fair enough.
And I think a big thing for you in a couple of your last years of hunting was that you were in college.
Yeah, with the timing, it's a different scenario than those seasons. I'm not out there for the trophy. I'm
You're just out
happy to
there
fill the freezer.
Fill the freezer, fill the tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that said, you're not going out to shoot the first tiny little thing that you see, are you?
No,
No, because you want to let those ones try and mature a little bit, right?
we do.
Yeah.
A lot of people end up in that situation where it might be the last couple days of season where it's like, well, the first 2-year-old that comes by or the first big doe.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, I got in that scenario. I was helping a younger gentleman hunt, or I guess our neighbor here, taking him hunting, and we just couldn't get a shot opportunity. And then a day came where I had a chance to hunt on my own. I'm like, this might be my last day of the season. I'll shoot the first lone doe I see. Ended up the first deer I saw was a 3-year-old buck. So
So the next,
he filled the freezer.
yeah, no, for sure, and that's really what matters the most, because that's really why we all hunt. It's for the enjoyment, and it's also for putting the food on the table. And I always enjoy being able to know where my meat came from, how it died. I know in a slaughterhouse they don't usually get it nearly as nice as what our animals do when we're hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make a marginal or a bad shot, then that's something that you got to live with, right? And it gives you something to, as a stepping stone, to kind of work on for the next time that you're out there. It makes you practice a little more, challenge yourself for different situations and whether you should or shouldn't take the shot, right?
Also make sure your gear is working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything falls into place.
So then the next one I want to transition into is guided hunts. So a lot of people go on a guided hunt, and whether it's for a deer, for a moose, bear, whatever you're going out for, the outfitter's always going to show you the pictures of the biggest animals that they're shooting, right? And so Ryan and I were talking about this on the way here today. And you're going hunting in the Yukon for moose. Of course, they're going to show you the pictures of the 60-plus inch bulls, right?
Yeah.
When realistically, when you go up there, you're looking at kind of mid to low 50s is their average. And it kind of sets an unrealistic expectation for the hunter going in, saying, you know what, these guys are shooting all these bulls. I'm going to get one of those too. Now, you could, and it's not wrong to set an expectation like that.
Yeah.
But you got to also have the real expectation of, well, maybe I'm only going to see a 55 or a 52. And
In that
you gotta be happy
situation,
with
I think
that.
you'd have to decide what makes you happy.
Yeah.
If you truly want that 60-inch bull moose in those hunts, you have to be willing to pass up the 55s, and you have to be willing to go home empty-handed. And
Yeah.
it might take 3-4 occasions, but at the end, if you succeed and that's truly what you wanted,
Yeah.
then it's well worthwhile.
Yeah, and the other part too is if a guy's paying that amount of money for a hunt, you're probably not there to solely fill your freezer. You're more so there for the trophy you're bringing home.
Yeah.
And the filling the freezer aspect is also just a bonus. Or in our cases, sometimes we've donated the meat to the local communities, and that feeds people for a long
On
time.
a hunt like a moose hunt, sometimes the trophy isn't the size of that animal. It's the fact that, well, I've killed this nice, big, healthy moose. I've gone on this faraway hunt, and that to them might be the trophy in itself. I know I've heard of a lot of Americans they'll come up here in Alberta to bow hunt a moose, and the trophy isn't that you're going to shoot a massive moose. If they shoot a 25, 30, 40-inch bull, they're happy, and that's the trophy of the hunt for them, is
Yeah.
just that they've killed this moose with a bow.
Yeah, same thing for elk in Alberta. You're not going to find those 350-inch bulls. If you do, it's like winning the lottery, and it's not realistic to set that as an expectation. You're not hunting in New Mexico. You're hunting in Alberta, where there's a different set of rules and pressures and all that goes along with it. Now, you're on a guided hunt. You paid a lot of money for this hunt, and the first animal you see is a borderline shooter. Like, how do you react to that? Like, you've got 7 days worth of hunting in this area that usually hasn't been hunted in a long time,
Yeah.
or you got pictures of these really good deer in there that are coming by once in a blue moon, but you get a picture of one of the real decent ones, and you know that one's coming in all the time. You're sitting in that stand thinking, well, I could have a shot at these really big ones, but this smaller one that's still a shooter-sized deer or animal, whatever you're after, comes by on your first day. Are you going to take that shot, or are you going to wait?
Personally, I know everyone likes to say the whole phrase, don't pass up on the first day what you would shoot on the last.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I would kind of go with, that moral value of it. I would shoot. That's personally what I would do. I would shoot. I don't know about you guys.
I've heard some people, they'll weigh on their guide's experience and ask, is there a chance that we're going to find a better one like how likely are we? And you'd have to weigh in on it too. What did you go on that hunt for? Did you want to spend the entire 7 days hunting hard? Like, that could be a lot of it, just getting that vacation. That might be worth more than shooting the animal to you. So
Okay.
you got to weigh factors in like that as well.
So then, on the flip side of this, you're on a 7-day hunt, and you're on day 7. And I know you're grinning because you're that guy. You want to fill that tag. Make sure you don't go home empty-handed. But you're on this hunt. You have an expectation of right here, and an animal right here comes in on your last day. Are you thinking, you know what? I still have a couple hours in the night. I might be able to have something else walk by, or are you going to take that shot? Like, how much do you drop your expectation or your standards?
I think a large part of how low you're able to drop your expectations on a guided hunt depends on the outfitter that you're going with.
Yeah.
Lots of times they'll have a trophy cap or an inch limit, so I've heard of lots of outfitters in the Midwest, they have a 140 inch minimum, and if you drop below that certain size of deer without their permission, you get tagged with a trophy fee or a size fee.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot that has to do with it. If you're in a hunt in a situation like that, I don't think you lower your standards. But I think if you're in an area, maybe you're doing a management hunt in Texas or something of that sort, and the outfitter says, yeah, if you want to fill your tag on this size animal, or maybe you want to take your tag with a doe, if that's what you want to do just to fill your tag, then I think that's the situation that you would go with.
I've always viewed those management hunts as something where it's about getting the tag filled. You're there to serve a purpose, whether it be like you're saying a Texas deer hunt where I believe most of them it's anything that's less than a 10-pointer is a management buck if it's over X age class. So on a hunt like that, if a 3-year-old walks by, I think you should be considering that opportunity heavily.
Yeah.
I always go back to what would make you happy with your hunt. If you can measure your success in inches, then you have to stand by that. If you're happy to fill the tag, if you'd be happy with that animal, I don't see why you shouldn't shoot it. But
So then, now in the broader looking at things, like within the hunting community, there's a certain level of acceptance, and for whatever reason, we're our biggest enemies because we all attack each other. We all want to see each other fail, even though at the same time we love to see pictures of each other succeeding. It's the strangest dynamic, I think, out of most any hobbies that I've seen. But a lot of guys will say, yeah, well, if you're not going to get your trophy class animal, like you're going into an area where you should be getting a 150-inch whitetail, and the only things you're seeing are 120s, they're like, well, you should just go home skunked. Like, just eat the tag. And then there's the other guys, they're like, oh, no, all day, shoot that 120-inch deer. Now, if you get a guy, and this is the other part of it too, so youth in hunting and the older gentlemen in hunting are usually kind of covered as far as it's accepted if you see them shoot a smaller animal. Mm-hmm. Seeing that middle-aged guy that goes out, and a lot of times these middle-aged guys, they don't have the time, they don't have the money, and they're just trying to get out there and have a little bit of an enjoyable experience, fill the freezer for the family. But if they shoot something that's undersized by everybody else's standards within the community, then they get torn apart for it. Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of balance what you're doing as far as how the other part of the hunting community wants to see it?
I think you have to weigh in on your enjoyment. I don't think you should let anybody tell you like, oh, this animal's undersized. If truly, I know a lot of people around here, they're meat hunters, mm-hmm. so it makes them happy. They're hunting because it's something they enjoy doing, and hunting hard, putting all the time in to hunt the mature deer it's something that won't interest everybody. I know I have seasons where it's not the end all be all of the season. It's just about getting outdoors, spending the time, and coming with something in the end of it, filling that freezer.
Yeah.
Okay, so then my next question would be for you. I seen on Facebook this morning this younger kid was talking about how he's watching all these other hunters, and he wants to accomplish the North American Grand Slam, which is a huge feat. Was it 28, 29 animals with a bow? They all got to qualify for the record books. Tom Miranda did it. It's one that I know for sure.
Very difficult.
Very difficult. Not to mention how expensive it's becoming. Like the prices to go hunt all these animals that used to be however much, they're almost double now. It's becoming so much more difficult. The fellow said he wanted to be part of the Boone and Crockett Club.
Yeah. And
so you're going out with this in your mindset, right? And we've also found out that through videotaping and hunting for Slager Outdoors, that it can take the fun out of your hunting.
It can very much, and as you're starting to get into that videotaping and that bigger, broader spectrum of, you're starting to focus on your scores, you're relying on your trail cameras, you start to take the fun and the surprise out of hunting. I personally, I get the most enjoyment out of hunting when I get up in a stand, You know, it's nice breeze. You know, the sun's coming down. You're watching, you know, deer, or moose, or elk, or bears, you know, feed out and doing their natural things. That's where I get the most enjoyment. And then when you get a good, mature, you know, sizable animal that you want to take out of the herd, one that would benefit conservation, that to me, that's the most important thing to do.
And I think it's also important that you kind of instill in your mind, and if you got kids that you're raising that want to be in doing this, you make sure that they realize that it's more about the experience of the hunt and not so much about the number of inches.
Yeah.
Because you can have, what's BNC all time, 190 on a whitetail?
I'm not specifically sure,
So-
but that sounds about right.
You shoot an animal and you're like, oh, this one's it. This is my one. I'm going to get into that level of the record book, and you miss it by half an inch. Do you beat yourself up about it? Does that take anything away from your trophy? Because if you're really focusing on just getting that number, the person's probably going to be pretty down about it.
I think that's motivation for next year. You've always got something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Once you break that,
Then
the other deer, if your goal is to break that BNC all time, it wouldn't matter if you have 1, 2, 10.
Mhm.
I think what would matter to you as a hunter is having achieved that goal.
yeah, it's a very fair way to look at it.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, to you guys, I'll start with Spencer. Does scoring take the fun out of hunting?
I think it would depend on the animal and the scenario. I know lots of times with whitetails, it's always like they're a plentiful animal around here and you get to hunt them every year. So if there's a year we have lots of time and it can add some fun where you're gonna, oh, I'm gonna score this deer, and like it's a friendly competition between other hunters. And it's not putting down anybody else's deer, like they're all tremendous animals. For me, there's situations where, yeah, like it could take the fun out, but I've always enjoyed scoring them, and it's a way of measuring your success.
Okay. So then, Ryan, same question to you, but the way that it's perceived, like if you're shooting deer that are 120 inches all the time with your gun, people are gonna be like, "Ah, well, you're just going out there, you're wasting time. Like you should be sitting and waiting for something much bigger." So, in that aspect, it would seem that scoring could take fun out of the hunting. But how do you see that?
Personally, I think when someone focuses solely on the score and they're sitting out there and they're saying, I have to get absolutely this specific number,
Mhm.
that can take the fun out of hunting. And it has for me specifically, because I've hunted entire months in November waiting for this one deer to score this certain amount, and I've had cool deer, mature deer come in that would fall below that mark, maybe 5, 10, 15 inches, and I've passed them up. And I've learned to beat myself up over that, because I would have had just as much enjoyment harvesting those mature animals as I would have harvesting this bigger deer. And I think a lot of times certain people's expectations for this certain inch mark, it can be really it becomes disillusional because of trail cameras,
Mhm.
because of pictures of people online. If you're in Saskatchewan and you're shooting 150-inch deer off of a bait at 20 yards every year with your bow, and you're in Alberta, there's a big difference, because in Alberta we aren't allowed to bait.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with baiting, and I would never, pick on anyone for doing that, but the style of hunting has a lot to do with your expectation of the trophy that you're going to harvest, and then going even a step further than that, your effective range with your weapon that you're using. If someone's getting into a tree stand and they can only shoot 20 yards and they're sitting on the edge of a field, rather than sitting 20 yards from a bait, their success value is going to lower quite a bit, because that potential of that deer stepping outside of their effective range becomes much higher.
Yep, I could see that. And the other thing too about focusing a lot on a number or a score, I got drawn for mule deer a couple of years ago, and I never filled my tag. I was unsuccessful. I didn't have a shortage of opportunities, but for some reason in my mind I had set that I was going to shoot this buck that was at least this size. And I find the more you focus on it, the more you underscore the animals that you're seeing. You just have in your mind already that everything's going to be too small. And then once you see the one that is that size, you're like, I don't know if he's going to make it. I think I can wait a little bit longer. And then all of a sudden you never see anything near that again.
I believe I remember the exact deer that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear you elaborate on, I think a fellow hunter ended up taking that deer that season and they had scored it. And I think it exceeded what you're hoping for, didn't it?
That one with the deer, I actually don't. Oh, I actually, you know what? I know what you're talking about. So that deer that you're talking about, we had a lot of arguments between Ryan, myself, and our dad about what this deer scored, and I think we varied 50 inches.
It was a
significant amount. And the next season, which would have been last hunting season, a gentleman shot this deer and it scored, what was it, like 210?
It was about 210, 217, something.
So it was a really nice mule deer buck, really nice.
Quite a bit non-typical.
Yeah. And Ryan and I tried to do the stock on this deer, and it's a shame that we didn't have a camera because this buck came to like 10 yards.
But he had only given you an unethical neck shot.
Yeah, I could see probably 3 inches below his chin.
And with a bow, that's not an ethical shot to take.
Yeah, that's too marginal, and it's just, that's the way that it happens when you're hunting. Like, we're sitting there, we're like, okay, there's a trail coming out over here, and it's 20 yards from us. The trail over here is 30 yards from us. Mm-hmm. He walked right to where we were sitting.
He walked right to the middle of that canola, right at us.
Yeah.
Of course, he had no idea we were there.
Yeah, no, of course.
But it's that, and that's another thing. When people are looking to harvest an animal of a certain inch size, I find that as a deer gets more mature, it grows its sixth sense.
Yeah.
And it becomes so smart that lots of times people don't have the patience for that size. Mm-hmm. That's nothing wrong with someone. Like, that doesn't put a flaw in someone's ability to hunt.
No, but you have to be able to sacrifice time and be able to have the patience to sit there and outweight that animal, because they only get that size for a reason. Mm-hmm. Right? They're smart enough to know that they're not supposed to come out as soon as it's light out, or right way before it gets dark, and give everybody those opportunities. They're mostly nocturnal, and when they do give you a chance, they're probably not going to give you a second chance. Mm-hmm. And I learned that hard lesson when I was hunting for mule deer, and I saw this really nice buck, and I could have shot him at like 80 yards with my rifle. And the other part of it too that I weighed in was the fact that it was opening day of rifle season, and I was like, well, I know that there's a big buck down here, and our dad had seen a buck down there that he thought might have been bigger, and I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page that this was the deer.
The same deer.
The only difference is that he was in velvet, and the deer in velvet can tend to look a lot larger than one that's hard-horned. And I passed up this buck, and I sat there quite a few more times afterwards and never did see him. I saw all of his buddies, but I never saw him again. And so that kind of goes to the looking a gift horse in the mouth. And even with that moose hunt that Dad did in the Yukon, where he saw that real nice bull on the first morning, the first moose that they saw, and he decided to pass on it. And even talking to him now about it, he said that he kind of wishes that he would have maybe taken that shot.
And I think a lot of that, when you're hunting, and you are looking for pure enjoyment of the hunt from what is going on inside of you, don't listen to anyone else.
No.
Like, to listen to someone else when you're really focused on harvesting an animal, you're only going to become disappointed.
Yep.
And I think in a moment like that, you do learn to regret it, because sometimes you do focus on what other people are saying.
I do think in a hunt scenario like that, the cool factor of that hunt, how there was so many big moose that he'd seen, if he would have shot the first big bull that he'd seen, that'd be it. The hunt was over. He wouldn't have all those encounters with the rest of that hunt. It would have been... He would have moved on to the next species, perhaps. I don't remember on that hunt if it was a multi-species, or if that would have been the end of the hunt.
And then you chance going home with nothing. Every time you pass up on an animal, you chance going home with nothing.
Even if it's one slightly below your standards.
Yeah. Well, a few years ago when we were out hunting for whitetails, and I had decided I'm going to shoot a deer of this class, and I passed up deer after deer after deer, and most deer that I would have shot any other time, but I just... a little bit stubborn in my own mind. I was like, you know what, we're going to try and hold out for something significant, and ended up settling for something quite less by the end of that hunting season. Yeah. But that's a chance that you take when you're out doing it. And do I regret it? No, not a chance. I've shot many deer in the 120 class, and I got a buck. My biggest buck scores about 170. I think he's just a hair underneath. And I got deer in the 120 class that I enjoyed that hunt more than my deer in the 170 class.
Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing across all these platforms and all these different points of view is not to beat down other hunters for the way that they hunt.
No.
Because there's nothing wrong with someone, as long as people are getting outside, they're hunting ethically, they're enjoying the outdoors, they're not destroying any farmers' crops, you know what I mean? They're leaving the land in better condition and conserving the wildlife for the next generation. Yeah. Everybody should still support the next generation of hunters, or the hunter that you see down the road or on the same property, or as
Yeah,
long as you're supporting the other hunters, I think everyone is going to win at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a huge thing to be supportive within even the current hunters, because there's a lot of guys that I've met that are like, yeah, you know what, it just got too competitive. Guys were getting to the point where they're pushing you out of spots on purpose, and that's a lot of what drives a lot of people to quit hunting. And in today's day and age, it's hard to find people to carry on the hunting tradition, and it's really important because we got problems with wildlife. We talk about grizzly bears all the time, and it just, you got too many people against hunting, and the hunters within the community are attacking each other, and it just doesn't work out for trying to promote it.
It becomes a double-edged sword, and in order for this to kind of mend and fix itself, hunters have to be able to band together on all platforms in order to fight back the anti-hunters and the way that the world has started to kind of go in trend.
Yeah.
Because stuff like grizzly bear hunting, it will never open ever again in any of these provinces or states or anywhere where these populations are large enough to support hunting. It will never open again without hunters getting together and putting their foot down and saying, look, this has to be managed. Because if we don't band together, it will never exist again.
Yep. And I know a person is supposed to sit there and trust the scientists, trust the biologists, because these people are working full time at it. But I don't think anybody sees how the populations of animals are doing quite like the people that are out hunting them. Right? Like even look at the deer populations from year to year here. Like, you have to notice a difference in them, right, Spencer?
I definitely would say we do. I do believe part of, if there is any discrepancies between the real population numbers and the reported ones, I'd blame lack of funding.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough for Fish and Wildlife to have enough biologists out there and enough field hours to accurately judge it. I know I've heard some people even in northern Alberta that are talking about walleye populations in a lake. I know this is off tangent a bit, but they said after a day of fishing they'd encountered Fish and Wildlife, and they said, they're asking, why is the walleye limit 0? We had the best day of fishing we've ever had. And they said, well, there's only 200 breeding pairs in this lake. Some guy says, well, I must have caught half of them. And then another man heard the conversation. He says, well, I caught the other half then. It was just there wasn't enough funding into the research, and all they could do was test this one stream. Okay, here's how many fish came to spawn in this one stream.
Yeah.
When the reality of it is, it's like, okay, yes, that is the main spawning stream, but they don't
hang out there all the time.
And the walleye can spawn in the lake.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And like you were saying before, it's sometimes you remember the experience more than you do the hunt, getting more back to where we were. And I can remember Dall sheep that Dad hunted. And he got a Dall sheep on the first hunting day that we were allowed to actually go out with the gun. And I remember that's one of my favorite hunting adventures, not solely because we got the sheep, and it was an awesome ram, a cool hunt, but just the adventure of getting there, taking a commercial plane to a fly-in only town, taking a small plane into hunting camp, taking a helicopter from hunting camp to spike camp, and then sleeping in tents on the side of a mountain in a place where the sun never sets.
And on the way in, you also seen a grizzly bear 300 yards from your
Yeah,
tents.
just down the hill from our tents. And for some reason, we never did see him while we were there. And then I believe we saw him again when we flew out, right around the same area, which is cool. And we got an awesome Dall sheep. That's a trophy of a lifetime for a lot of people. It was a trophy for our dad, and awesome hunt. It was cool to get it on video. But just the whole thing that I remember most about it is the experience and the adventure of getting there.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes it's not weighed in high enough when a person's talking about how their hunt went. Like, you can talk about some of your other animals. Like my biggest whitetail. We went out to Saskatchewan. Everything was set up to hunt. This buck we had pictures of consistently in the dark. We never saw this buck in daylight. Nobody saw a glimpse of him. Nobody got any pictures of him. Nothing. We sit down first morning. I'm there. 9 a.m. Walks out. Broadside shot. Take him. That was it. First day of the hunt. The biggest buck we had pictures of. And not quite the adventure of the other hunt that also only took one day. But
I'm sure it'll be a memory you'll never forget.
no, absolutely it will be. But there's just, like I was saying, I got other animals that were a little bit smaller, and I can just remember vividly all the details of getting up to it, and I almost appreciate those hunts more And I think it's really about how the hunt is to the hunter and not how it looks to everybody else. It's cool to shoot that big buck and put it on social media and get all the likes and comments and shares or whatever.
Make it to Boone and Crockett, Pope
Yeah,
and Young.
yeah, hit those standards.
Get the trail cameras. Say, look, I shot this buck. I nicknamed so and so.
Yeah.
But on the same subject, it's the biggest thing is not to put other people down for what they enjoy to do.
No, absolutely.
We did a hunt in an army base in Alberta here on the east side.
Yeah.
And that was a management deer hunt. And that's the purpose of that deer hunt. You don't go in there specifically to hunt trophies. People can, and people do harvest trophies out of there.
And they boast it.
Yeah,
big time.
And but it is only a 3-day hunt, and we did it with primitive weapons, muzzle loaders, and we had a lot of fun.
Yep.
I shot 2 mule deer, because you're given 2 tags, either sex, either species. You shot a mule deer and a whitetail.
Yep.
And my dad also shot a mule deer and a whitetail. And across the board, I had more fun on that hunt than I have on a lot of hunts where I shot, a buck that was 130, 140, 150.
Yep.
Because it was that getting together as a family. It was that working as a team, harvesting these deer.
The memories.
Exactly. It's so memorable to have a hunt like that. And that's coming from someone who's become I was more raised as a trophy hunter.
Yep.
I was raised to harvest mature animals, and that was a management hunt. And I still enjoyed it because I was open to the experience.
Yeah, and you have to also realize, like, everybody's growing up. You're not going to see people putting out on YouTube or the hunting channels or their videos. They're not going to be like, oh, yeah, watch, we just took down all these forkhorns this year. No, they're shooting big bucks. And it makes a person want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like watching Fast and the Furious. First thing you're going to do is go jump in your car and fly down the road. Right? Like, you're not going to go and jump in your Prius and just putt down to the store. No, you see these guys shooting these big bucks, you want to set that standard for yourself. And you're like, yeah, I can do that too.
You truly enjoy following in their adventure and their story. And it's something you want for yourself. It's that you have this connection to the animals, and it's the time, the effort put in, the challenge. And then the reward, the feeling is when you can look at the end of the day and go, well, this was one of the better bucks in the herd this year.
Yep.
This was like... this might have been 3 in 100 to get this deer, or 1 in 100 to get this deer, and I did it. That means a lot to a lot of people. But touching on Ryan's talk about his hunt in the army base, I truly think you have to decide on your own what do you enjoy with hunting, what means the most to you. Is it the memory of the hunt? Is it the big animal?
Is it the meat?
Is it the meat? Is it about harvesting any animal? It's like it could be different for your deer. For myself, it is. It's one year I might want to shoot a giant buck, or if a nice one comes by and it's not quite the score, I can decide, well, it's not what I'm looking for, or hey, this is a real cool buck, and I don't care what he scores.
You want to set your own goals. You don't want it to be influenced by everybody else.
No,
it's okay to have those goals.
I truly do think through your hunting career, you're going to find what you enjoy. And I think everybody should approach it with that mentality of here's what I like.
No, absolutely. And then on that army base hunt as well, I think at the end of... Well, how many hunters were there?
It was
150?
150.
150 hunters for this 3-day season.
There would have been some, people that were there just as like people watching.
So 150 hunters, 300 deer tags for 3 days. Now, that sounds like a lot for the army base, but there's a lot of deer there. And, I mean, it's achievable, I guess, if you're doing it the right way. But by the end of the 3 days, when I called in to find out how many deer had been shot, I think it was in the low 70s. And the 3 of us, out of the 150, accounted for 6. So we accounted for almost 10% of all the deer that were shot. And it's a hunt that we're never going to forget. I know it took a long time to get the tag, but we're already still talking about it. Every time we get together, we're like, yeah, we can't wait to get in there and do it again. And we're going to get Spencer in on it next time too. And we're going to go in there and have a blast, because it was about getting out there, having a fun time. Sure, the quality of trophy animals is there. We saw a mule deer in there that we thought was an elk.
Yeah.
The things G2s were just absolutely ginormous.
We've seen lots of trophy class whitetail bucks.
Yeah, exactly. And we missed lots of trophy quality animals.
We did.
But that was all part of the experience.
It's part of the style of hunting that we were doing as well. Just as given with your trophy sizes in 3 days, maybe someone would go in there and say, look, if I harvest one of my deer, if I sit in the same spot and I'm okay with not seeing a lot of deer and I just want to harvest one animal, as long as it's a good sized trophy, that's okay. We went in there with the mindset of, we want to harvest all of our tags.
Yep.
We want to control the population, make sure we take care of everything. That was the point of the hunt to us. And we went in there and we did just that.
Yeah, and see, the part that's not acceptable is, and not even us, because it's not about bragging, right? If you're successful, you're successful. But I remember witnessing somebody shot an animal, and because you have to report it in every day, and they got to take samples for chronic wasting disease, which is unfortunate. But somebody would come by because they see somebody put their tailgate down. Oh, they got a deer or whatever, and they come over and be like, "Ah, yeah, it's not that big," and walk by.
Yeah.
And the person who shot it standing right there, and maybe that person that shot it was like, "Man, this is my biggest deer. I'm so pumped." And the first person that walks by is like, "Yeah, no." Like, you shouldn't be doing that.
No, it's a very unacceptable behavior amongst the hunting community.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really, it keeps young hunters and people who are trying to get into hunting from getting into it into a way where they actually become passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like any hobby you do or any sport you try to, get into, you have to have a personal experience that really drives you to continue doing it, that gives you that passion to keep saying, you know what, I'm doing this every year, I'm going to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we, behave in such a poor manner to where we actually discourage people from getting into hunting, that's where we have lack of funding, that's where we lose. We really, as hunters, as a whole group, we will lose if we can't bond together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a huge importance factor, is that a person has to be able to get along with the fellow hunter, because it's important.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, just because maybe I wouldn't say, go out in the bush to harvest just specifically like harvest a doe or, just for meat, doesn't mean it's wrong if the guy next to me does it.
Mm-hmm.
As long as everyone's getting out there, they're enjoying the experience of hunting, they're getting meat, you know what I mean? They're putting it on their table, they're feeding their family, they're spending time out there with their family and friends, they're taking care of the outdoors. And I think that's the biggest benefit to all of it.
Yeah, and now another thing too, I think if you're going out and you're setting a standard for yourself, whether it's size or whatever, I think the most important thing is to harvest the mature animals, like you were talking about, Spencer.
Yeah.
Because we've seen deer that were well into their maturity, past their prime, and the bucks never scored more than 130 or 140.
Sometimes the genetics don't support it.
No, they don't.
I've picked up pairs of antlers with 6 inches of mass on the base, but that deer only scored 127 inches.
Yeah, and there's a video on YouTube, and I can't remember. I feel bad because I would give these guys credit, but they hunted this buck year after year after year. All he ever grew up to be was like a giant 3x3. He had big forks and brow tines, and every year that was about the same. They ended up shooting this buck when he was 8 years old, and the only reason they shot him was because every year on the same day he walked by the same tree. And they're like, well, it's happened all these years in a row, we might as well hang a stand. They sat there, they shot him. Which is just crazy, but that just shows the habitual patterns of these animals, and it also shows that they don't always get to this massive size.
I think that'll be a very memorable deer for them too,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of trophy in the fact that it's a weird buck. It's a really cool story of it's the same day and you never see him, but this one day he comes on trail camera here.
Exactly, you have the history with that animal, and that means more than the size.
That's an incredible story to tell people too.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that deer may have only scored 110, 120 inches, whatever he would have scored. Mm-hmm. That to those guys probably meant the same to a guy harvesting 180-inch whitetail.
Yep. And the whitetail I shot last year with my bow and arrow, it was a nice 5x4. It made Pope and Young, which was cool. It was my first Pope and Young whitetail. He came in, and he was the last deer of 3 bucks that were coming by the stand. The first one was small. The second one was a really nice 5x5 that I had pictures of, and I came to full draw on that deer. And I thought to myself, like, you know what, I think this deer is a little bit immature. And so I let my bow down, and all of a sudden I seen the third buck coming through the trees, and I'm like, oh, it's this other buck. And I knew it was a good deer, he was going to score well, but I also knew that 5x5 was going to score higher. But to me, I was like, I don't really care. This other buck's got more mass. He's a bigger body.
He's more to you.
Yeah, he's a more mature deer. And so I came to full draw, and as soon as he gave me a shot, I gave him an arrow. And to this day, I would have still taken the shot on that deer. Yeah. And I'm excited. Hopefully, this year we get pictures of that 5x5, and he's into that range now where you would want to take that shot.
See what he turned out to be for a buck. That'd be cool.
Because you also give him the opportunity to sow his seeds and make his gene pool spread out and extend if you give him the chance to mature, because once a buck hits 3.5, his breeding becomes a lot more prevalent.
And in my honest opinion, I think that the smaller buck had better genetics.
Yep.
And that's why I think that seeing that deer compared to the one that I shot, even this year, he still would have been a bigger scoring deer than the one that I shot. But again, it comes down to the maturity factor.
It's weighing on what makes you happy to be a hunter.
Yeah,
Or what makes
exactly.
you happy in that hunt, in that situation. It's you want the older buck and you got him.
Yeah.
Kudos to you for making that decision.
No, for sure. It's awesome, and it's something you can boast to yourself, and you can be proud around whoever else. Somebody wants to tell you, hey, it's not that big, and you're like, oh, well, let me see yours.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of times it's just jealousy. Now my next question kind of veers off topic a little bit, but with how scoring can affect how you perceive hunting, what about trail cameras? Like, everybody's sitting in their stands, they're like, I know exactly what deer are in this area. I know them by name. I know that this deer's got a funny kicker on his G2, or this deer's brow tine leans to the left. Like,
And you spent $20 on an app to score them potentially too. I've seen that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I believe, I don't know if there's a guarantee on them, but from my understanding, you'll be within 2 inches on what that deer scores with
now,
trail cam
when
pictures
we were
on them.
kids and we first started hunting, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. You plop your blind or your tree stand down in the middle of who knows where, and you had no idea what lived there.
Yeah.
You're like, well, let's see what happens. The biggest buck in this area could be a forkhorn or a spike. But you're going to sit there and you're going to be like, oh my goodness, a deer is coming in. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah.
Whereas you're sitting there, you got your trail cam set up. You're like, oh, it's the lame 9 or it's the big 5 or whatever. And you're like, oh, like, you don't feel the same level of excitement.
Deer are almost becoming pets. That's
Yeah.
something my father's termed that as, is when you have these trail cam pictures and they're named, it's like, it's like your pets, or it's like your farm animals. If you know them all by name, and you know everyone that's going to come in, you know what time they're coming in or what their pattern is roughly.
Yeah, so for me personally, I think it really does take the fun out of it.
I agree.
Now, that said, we put trail cameras up all the time. And for me personally, it's more so just to know how many animals are in an area. I want to know what time of day they're crossing a spot so that I know I'm not wasting my time to sit there in the morning when it's an evening spot. You kind of get a general size consensus, but I don't usually pay a huge amount of attention unless I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing looks like it's going to pull my wall down when I mount it.
I do think it is great though, having that ability to know all the deer with the trail cameras. It's fun. It's a different style of hunting. I think it's something everyone should experience. You should experience multiple styles of hunting, and
I agree. But the important thing is not to take the fun out of hunting from using trail cameras. A trail camera is an amazing tool to be able to use as a hunter, but people who focus too much on specifically, when they're paying for how big their deer is, well, if that is what they like, then that's okay, but not to condescend down on another hunter for not using his trail camera the same way, or maybe not using them at all.
And I've seen it where guys will say something like, yeah, I know, I set up my camera, I got these 2 bucks that are almost like they're borderline shooters, and I'm just not going to shoot them this year because they're just not good enough. When, if they didn't have that trail camera set up and one of those bucks walks by, they're probably like, oh man, this is a shooter.
Mm-hmm.
You know
but
what
they
I mean?
might be disappointed in the end, so
There's a
it's for
possibility
their
of that,
enjoyment
too.
of the hunt.
Yeah, no, exactly.
At the end of the day, I think you have to do what you enjoy and make it worthwhile as long as you're ethical.
Yeah. And back to the topic of mature animals, if you're shooting a deer that's 8 years old, whether he's 190 inches or 120 inches, I promise you that deer is the same level of smartness. You're not going to find an 8-year-old buck that's dumb and an 8-year-old buck that's a genius, because they both made it to 8 years old doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It depends what area they're in, how heavily pressured they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And
But on a general sense, what you're getting at is basically, it's still the same amount of difficulty to harvest that animal if you put a 190-inch 8-year-old in the same spot as a 120-inch 8-year-old.
Oh yes.
Both those deer are the same amount of smart. So when someone shoots that 190, you can't say it was smarter than that 120. That's, I think, kind of what you were getting at.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's just, it comes hand in hand with looking for a mature animal. Your mature animal is, you're looking for, you're trying to outsmart an animal, right? Like, it's easy to outsmart the 2-year-olds, but you get into the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, if they make it that far, then those are the ones that are very, very difficult to trick or try and catch on your good day and their bad day, right? Now, another question I have, and I see this all the time, mounting an animal that isn't of substantial size. Now, a lot of guys will be like, oh, this is my first year, I'm getting it mounted. And then you get other people who are like, oh, I wouldn't mount anything unless it's 180 inches, or I wouldn't mount this moose unless it's 60 inches, or it really boils down to the size and the experience of the hunter. Again, like Dad's got an elk mounted that was his first bow kill and his first bull, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not a huge bull; it's a 5x5.
Yeah, just a young 5x5. And
but he was like, you feel so elated when you get one of those animals of that. Like at that time, it was really difficult to get one. The area, it wasn't easy. It was a hard, grueling hunt. You get one of those animals, and a lot of people will also take and pick on people that mount an animal of smaller size.
I don't see anything wrong with mounting the smaller animals. It's what do you enjoy? I know it's awesome to have the big mounted animals, and it's probably the ones you want to look at, but if it's a really pretty animal, or if you got the spot picked out, okay, this year I'm hunting, and I've got this spot on the wall for this elk. Okay, whatever elk I get's going up there, and it ends up being smaller. I think that's perfectly fine if you want to mount the smaller animal. It's mounting something to look at. It's for your enjoyment of your hunt. It's to remember that animal, that trophy.
There's a story behind everything, yeah.
Yeah.
And a big part of that would be whether a white-tailed deer is 100 inches or 120, there's still the same value on that deer. It's still an amazing creature that we were able to go out and harvest, and we should still give it the same amount of respect no matter what the size. I think that's a large part. We deserve, or we owe the respect to the animals.
Yeah, that's another good way of looking at it. And I know you got, your two first really nice deer. You got both of them mounted. And there's a lot of people who'd be like, well, I mean, the one, sure. The other one, I don't know. Or both of them, I don't know. But at the same time, you're like, man, I'm so pumped. I got these animals. I can't wait to display them to everybody. And I know me personally, if I walk into somebody's trophy den or their room and they got a couple of mounts, and I notice that one's smaller than the other, like by a substantial, significant amount, I want to know the story behind that one.
Yeah.
Because there's some reason that guy put that on his wall, and you're like, I got to know why. Right? And I think that's another big thing, and I think it gets overlooked. I also think that as a hunting community, there needs to be a little bit more acceptance in the fact that people are going out to have fun, have a good time, and it's not about pointing fingers at people or telling people they're doing things wrong or trying to steer people in the wrong direction, because that's not a great way to go.
Chasing people out of areas and such, and I think it's a big part is just to come together as hunters. In the United States, they have a very good base of hunters that is able to come together in a lot of their areas and zones and states. And in Alberta, it's a very vicious personality that most hunters carry here. It can be very difficult. And I think it would definitely be a good thing if, hunters in Alberta would be able to come together and help each other more than hurt each other.
I do think it does add an element of fun at times, the competition in areas where if everybody knows, there's this big bull elk, there's this big whitetail or big mule deer, it's kind of cool to see some of the competition when if it's kind of a fair shot. But at the end of the day, if you got guys chasing the deer out of the field with their pickup trucks because they don't have permission on it, I think that's something we should frown upon more than we usually do. People just look at it like, well, they're just protecting the animals so they get their shot at it.
Yeah, the people bending and breaking the rules as opposed to the person who had an absolute blast doing everything by the rules. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Ethics has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. I think if you're going to tie into the ethics part of it, I know it's not really the topic we were going with for this podcast today, but if you're out there and you're practiced up and you're confident in your abilities and your equipment's confident, or not your equipment's confident, but your equipment is capable of doing something. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, like your bow, my bow, his bow, our guns are far more capable of doing what they were made to do than we are shooting them.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can elevate yourself to be even close to the level of what those weapons are capable of, and you're confident, by all means, take the shot.
Yeah.
Right? It's a person-to-person basis. You don't need to be attacking somebody because they made a shot and you thought it was too far for you, but it's not too far for them.
Exactly. That person may have put the time in or the practice and not to belittle anyone, but there is a difference between people and their ability to shoot. There's Connor McDavid's, and there's enforcers. There's that's in the general sense. Some people are just better at shooting longer distance than others, and that's not to put anyone down.
Just comes to practice, too.
Exactly, but that doesn't mean you need to put down the guy who can do it.
Yeah, and I don't think that by sharing that it encourages anybody. I watch and follow along with John Dudley in the Knock On all the time, and he makes some absolutely incredible shots. It blows my mind. I seen him post something, it was either this morning or yesterday, about like a 110-yard shot on a moose target, and he nailed it.
I remember one of his videos, I think, was a 95-yard turkey shot.
Exactly.
Shot the head clean off of it.
But
that's something I'd never attempt, but that'd tie back into trophy hunting. Like, the memory of that shot.
Totally.
And how cool and how difficult that shot was. It'd be a worthwhile thing to pursue if you're a hunter, to push yourself and push your limits.
And I think another person had asked him one time about how he decides on what he's going to shoot as far as score, and I think he said it was like 10 points each for each leg or something, and then add how good of a time you had out of 100 or something, and that was how he came out. It was something silly like that, but it's so true, right? Like, you get caught up in the everything going on in the community and the world around it, and they're like, oh no, it's just so much pressure. And I think if a person just takes a step back from that and realizes, hey, you know what, I'm out here, I'm having a good time, I'm getting away from whatever, and I don't have to work, and this deer's coming in, and I got a shot, and I got a freezer that needs him, I'm going to take that shot. And that's really what matters the most at the end of the day.
And a really big thing about that, when someone posts that video and it's a good shot, it was a long shot, or a difficult one, what's the reason to go on and comment things such as, well, how many animals did he wound before he did that?
Yeah, I know.
Because obviously he's proud of the hunt. He did a good job. And I don't care who you are, if your ethical range is 40, 60, 200, 400, everybody makes mistakes.
Yep.
In a hunting community, making mistakes is it's very normal.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that, you don't strive to be better.
Yeah.
But to make a mistake isn't the end of the world. You don't hate on other hunters for making a mistake, and definitely don't act as if you don't, because if you're a hunter and you've hunted and harvested multiple animals, you will make mistakes.
Yeah, it's normal to miss. It's normal to wound. It's normal to make a marginal shot. It's normal to make a bad shot. If you're an avid hunter, you have done at least a few of those.
You just gotta do everything you can to recover that animal on those marginal or the wounding shots.
And then past that, eliminate it for the next shot.
Now, if you're taking marginal shots on every animal, or you're missing every animal, or you're wounding every animal,
you might want to question your tactics.
Exactly. You might want to start practicing.
And your ethics on top of that. So.
No, I agree with that. And I think on that note, we're going to wrap up this podcast. We're getting ready to do something a little bit different. We're starting a little bit of a tradition here. We got the t-shirts, we got the greasy twig flinger. It sounds goofy, but greasy twig flinger, it's kind of up all of our alley, and
it's going to be a little bit of an archery competition that we got going.
Yeah,
and,
it's kind of we're kind of doing it for Ryan here mostly today, because if you can see it on there, we got last fling before the ring, and kind of the play on the words here with flinging the arrow, but Ryan's getting hitched here right away.
And 9-10 days getting married, so starting a new chapter in life. What better way to kind of get into it than shooting some arrows?
Yeah, we do some target shooting. We got a couple setups with tree stands and a couple of ground shots. We got a bunch of prizes lined up and made up some fun rules, and we're going to try and make this an annual thing.
Right on. We'll definitely appreciate you having us on, Tyler.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you guys for watching. Like always, let me know what you think. We're always open to criticism. I like to know what you like, what you don't like. And follow along on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, @OnTheBloodTrail. And yeah.
We get some links in the description to the hunts of your dad's that we're talking about on his channel.
Yeah, I'll definitely throw some links in there. His channel's rolling. Slager Outdoors. It's really picking up some steam.
That's good to see.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's always fun to see the community involvement, like always, and like you heard us talk about beating the dead horse over and over again. We hear the positive comments, the negative comments, but we're all out having a fun time. We wouldn't be sharing hunts with you guys if we hated them. So, yeah, no, for sure. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me, guys. Appreciate
no problem.
Thanks for having us.
We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Yep, see you later.